Welcome everyone to Planting Peace Equality House's Trans 101 panel and celebration of Transgender Visibility Day. This is an international event that happens every year on March 31st, and we are really happy we get to celebrate it with you here virtually. We were originally planning on throwing a party in the front yard here, but obviously we want to keep all of you safe and healthy, so we decided to take this virtual, and we're grateful for all of our panelists here who are joining us today to offer up their services and experience and education for all of us. I'm going to start off with a little bit of info about Planting Peace. So Planting Peace is a global nonprofit organization founded for the purpose of spreading peace in a hurting world. Our projects focus on a range of humanitarian and environmental initiatives, including our multinational deworming campaign, and network of orphanages and safe havens in developing countries, and LGBTQ rights advocacy, Equality House, the Transgender House, which is now named the Mott House, and rainforest conservation efforts in the Amazon. So Planting Peace is the nonprofit that owns both the Equality House and the Transgender House next door. The Equality House started in 2013. The first coat of paint went on that house on March 19th of 2013. And over the years, this house has held a variety of events. One day, a girl named Avery, who is transgender, she is the daughter of Debbie Jackson, LGBTQ advocate, she helped raise money for the transgender house next door. Planting Peace was able to purchase that property and paint it. And so now every year, instead of painting the Equality House transgender colors, we have that consistent representation all the time. So everybody is always welcome to come take photos of the house, and you are allowed to sign the wall closest to the street on the Equality House. Now I'm going to introduce our panelists. So I am Jessie Brace. I use they, them, their pronouns. I am a volunteer with Planting Peace, and I am bringing this to you live from the Equality House. Unfortunately, Aaron of Planting Peace could not be with us today, but he sends his best regards and congratulations on Transgender Day of Visibility. Also joining us, we have Nay, Luke, Rexy, and Spencer, and we're really grateful to all of them. And I'm going to turn it over to them to handle their introductions. Rexy, will you please start?
Sure. My name is Rexy Q. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm a board member at large on the South Central Kansas Equality Kansas chapter, as well as our state delegate to this chapter conference for Equality Kansas. I'm also the entertainment director for Wichita Pride Incorporated, and I have like a million other hats, but I won't go into those right now.
Okay, Nay, will you go?
My name is Nay. I just turned 25. I identify as non-binary and gender fluid. My pronouns are either she or he. I don't really have a preference. I see myself as kind of both and neither. I don't have a cool affiliation really to share at this time. Yeah, I'm sure more stuff about me will come out as I talk a little bit more.
I want to say that Nay is in a Pride Rock group for QCF, which is Queer Christian Fellowship, and has been a very active, positive participant in that community. So.
Just for the sake of diversity, I also am on the autism spectrum as well. So yeah, I'd like to share that.
We're really glad to have you today, and I'm really grateful that you agreed to do this.
Thank you.
My name is Spencer. My pronouns are he and his. Like me, I don't really have much affiliation. Just a community member that wants to be visible.
I want to say that Spencer has been a great resource to me as far as a few LGBTQ topics that I'm going to ask him later in this chat. So Luke, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. My name is Luke. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the president of the Equality Kansas Topeka chapter. And I am the president and founding member of Black Trans Men Inc. Kansas chapter. And I'm an entertainer. That's pretty much it for right now. The rest of it will probably come out later. And thanks for having me.
And I also want to add to Luke's affiliations. Luke was also with K-Step until K-Step recently dissolved. And if you know K-Step, you should know Luke's name. So I'm going to give a little bit of information before I start rattling off questions to all of our wonderful panelists. So for the sake of our panel here today, I'm going to say that transgender, actually, you know what, Rexy, do you want to answer this? What is transgender?
I guess I can. So a transgender person is somebody whose gender identity doesn't align with the gender identity that they were assigned at birth. So that would, just be anybody that's not the gender they were assigned at birth.
Thank you. Does anybody want to add to that?
I just want to add that identity labels such as gender fluid, gender queer, non-binary fall into that category as well. There's like often confusion there with that terminology in the community. And there can be disputes with whether or not transgender is an umbrella term, but I believe for the sake of this conversation, we're counting it as such, hence individuals like myself being invited to participate.
Right, so I want to say that for the purpose of this, transgender includes trans man, trans woman, non-binary, gender non-conforming, gender queer, gender fluid, etc. There is also people within the wider population of the world who may identify as gender non-conforming or agender, but do not identify as part of the trans community. So that is a very important distinction. When we're talking to people, we can't automatically assume someone identifies as trans or not. And that goes along with the stereotype of looking at someone and being like, oh, they're trans. Well, there's no way to tell that without asking them. And it's not the most polite thing to go up to someone and say, are you trans? And please don't do that.
It's also not polite to ask someone if they're a boy or a girl, which happens to me regularly.
The correct answer is no.
Yes, I say sometimes. It's both, personally.
Agreed.
Or you can say yes, that's also okay.
Yes, also that.
So our first question for our panelists is, what age, if at all, did you know you were trans? And if you had one, what did your coming out process look like? Spencer, will you take it?
Sure. I mean, I kind of fall into that narrative of I always knew something was different about me from childhood. I just never really could put my finger on it. When I was 26, however, I met another trans man and we had to do great heart talks. And I realized, that's what was different about me. That's where I belong. When I first came out, basically, I just started asking people to use pronouns in my name, Spencer. Very shortly after the name started HRT, I'm very, very lucky to have started it very shortly after that.
Thank you, Spencer. Luke, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. I think that I have always known, but because I grew up in a very strict religious situation, I was not able to um, express who I really was until after I left home. But I've always known. Um, I don't even know how to explain that. I've always known. Um, it's always been boy toys for me. I've had Hot Wheels and all that good stuff, and so I think I've always known. I just was not in a position when I lived at home to be able to be who I was. So I just that's pretty much it. I don't.
Nay, do you want to share?
I have a little bit of a different answer than is common. I realized and came out uh, at I realized my gender identity and came out just about 6 months ago. I was raised in a very, very conservative, homophobic, fundamentalist household where it was very clear from an early age, or as it was taught to me, was there's penis and vagina, there's male and female, that's all there is. So I just thought I was a tomboy because I just thought that's what that is. Like, I like wearing boys' clothes, and like I kind of am more masculine, like my voice is low and all this stuff. So I just thought that's all that was. And I didn't even hear like the terminology trans until I was like 19 or 20. That's how sheltered I was. Um, and I was married to a cis man. Um, so that just perpetuated those gender roles. Like, I was a wife, I was a female. Um, and then it really is when I got together with my current partner, who is genderqueer as well, but mostly identifies as female, that I really understood like what that meant to her, and then I could kind of see that that was me too. And then I got to know through her other trans people, other queer people, and yeah, kind of started discovering that for myself. And I'm still putting together the pieces of like who I've always been. It took me so long to realize because of like how sheltered I was.
Rexy?
Yeah, so I think I definitely kind of like when I was young knew that I wasn't what I was supposed to be, but definitely no words for what was going on. So I also kind of came from a really conservative, fundamentalist background. So I just kind of thought there was something wrong with me, and I just needed to like hide it and it will go away. So I didn't really think much about it until I was a teenager. Um, Something very big happened when just like a month before my 14th birthday that made me literally question everything that I had ever known. And so I, that's kind of when I started thinking about who I am. And I think fairly quickly thereafter, I had kind of settled on like I'm a trans girl since I was still a teenager. But then I didn't get a chance to actually come out. I think I kind of like tested the waters a little bit with my family that I was living with and my girlfriend at the time, and it was like, no, not happening. So I kind of just kept stuff hidden. But then during my first semester in college, 5 years ago, I did come out to some of my um, friends that were in the dorms, and they were all very supportive. Um, and then I decided to like actually come out to my mom, and that was really weird. She tried to be accepting at the beginning, but then quickly wasn't having it. Um, but then after a couple years of kind of exploring, getting to be kind of myself in that way, um, I think like I kind of settled on, well, I do still have like some masculine stuff that I do enjoy about myself. And so that kind of like led me into, again, kind of questioning, well, am I really a woman or am I like non-binary? Kind of settled on I'm a genderqueer trans femme person. Um, and that's kind of what I have been working with the past 3 years or so.
So for me, I started telling people I was a boy when I was just 3 years old. So when you hear that, now you can say you know someone that has actually confirmed they knew at that early age. And of course, my parents were like, "Oh, you're a tomboy," because I had a lot of boyfriends and stuff. And I always knew there was something different, but I never, for most of my life, didn't know any of the LGBTQ terms or anything. And so I grew up in a non-affirming household, and there went through conversion therapy, and it wasn't until Planting Peace started this equality house that I learned any of the LGBTQ terminology or met anyone in the community. So this house here in Topeka, since I'm originally from here, brought me into the LGBTQ community. What does being transgender mean to you? And I want all of you to answer this, starting with Luke.
I think for me, it just means living unapologetically in my truth. That's what it means for me.
So, I mean, for me personally, I just am who I am. And I don't necessarily like think of myself in the way that society puts me. But I recognize that, you know, the way that society is built is not for me. It's for cisgender people. So um, my kind of relationship with that term and what it means to me is really about living in a society where um, I'm kind of not allowed to exist. But I do. Hey.
Spencer?
Excuse me. I guess to me it means, like we said, to live authentically as myself. It means that I have some unique problems in my life that not a lot of people do. It means that I lost my train of thought there. Yeah. It really good. You might need to go back.
Okay. Nay, do you want to answer that?
What was the question?
What does being transgender what does being transgender mean to you?
A lot of things. Can I get spiritual for a second? Will that turn anybody off?
This is a safe space for all of that as long as it's not like our neighbors.
Gotcha. Yeah. Basically I see all people as a reflection of God, and I think there's a little bit of God in all people. And yeah, so I just think, like, to me, just however you see that, whether it's the universe or a person, like, is both genderless and like full of every gender there could be, slash gender doesn't exist, slash I'm still figuring it out. So I see myself as a representation of that, just very fluid. Yeah, it's fluid for me, and I enjoy that. I enjoy the morphing, the changing, and that it can be different day by day. And I enjoy the freedom of having that, because that's, again, very, very new to me, in how I present and how I feel about myself. And of course, that's a journey, and there's, I'm sure a lot of us have experienced some kind of, dysphoria, whether that be physically, socially, what have you, where, like Rexy mentioned, just feeling misplaced in a society that's not made for us. But I kind of welcome that challenge, and like, I'm an Aries. I love a challenge. I love making people uncomfortable. I just love, like, yeah, testing views that I think are not true and put people in those boxes that are hurtful. So that's what it means to me, is just a challenge and a gift to be fluid and to teach people about just that fluidity. I don't know if any of that made sense. I just pulled that out of my ass. So, yeah.
Well, it made sense to me. If anybody has any questions about that, they can
Yeah,
drop it
I
down.
can totally clarify anything. Yeah.
Spencer, did you gain your thought back?
I mean, it kind of means that I had a little bit of a different upbringing, but it also means that I am a man that didn't get pounded with the toxic masculinity growing up. And it means that I can teach my sons that it's okay for boys to cry. It's okay for boys to have emotions. It's okay for boys to like pink. It's okay for boys to like dresses. It's okay for boys to do anything girls like to do. It's okay for girls to do anything boys like to do.
So for me, it means that while I may not always be legally protected, I may have workplace discrimination. I may be able to be fired from my job or lose housing or just not be able to use the bathroom I want to use. But I'm the rainbow in the room, and I get to throw some glitter and shade, and I'm joined by an entire community that within the trans community there's a lot of love that I don't think I would be able to experience outside of this community, just because we all in a sort of way kind of know a little bit about what's going on, and so we can all relate at that level. Who has been your biggest supporter? Who wants to take that question? Spencer, do you have 3 of your biggest supporters?
That's a question I don't really have an answer for.
Well, let me ask you this.
I can't really narrow it down.
So you've had a lot of support though then?
Yes. There's only been maybe a handful of people I've had.
Well, that's really good. Rexy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can pick just 3. I have a lot of support from my chosen family and my friends. Not really much support from my relatives, although my brother and sister have been coming around, realizing that maybe I'm not the terrible person that our mother said I was.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there's already a lot of loss there with years of not being connected, so that's kind of awkward. But yeah, my biggest supporters are definitely the people that I picked because they were supportive.
Nay, did you want to answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely my girlfriend. She's in the other room. So she's hearing me say this. I love you. Yeah, I mean, without her, I wouldn't I probably eventually would have, because it's painfully obvious now that I've realized my gender identity. But like, she was definitely the cornerstone to like this journey for me. Gave me a lot of freedom in my sexuality, queerdom, and gender identity. So definitely my girlfriend. I actually get to give a shout out to my ride or die bestie of 11 years that's watching right now. Hi, Andy. Yeah, she's seen me through every major life change and milestone since I was 14. So definitely that chick. She's awesome. Third would be my little brother Kyle. He Yeah, I came out to him as non-binary, and he was kind of like, yeah, like I've known that since you were 14, 15. Like, I'm like, everyone knew but me, of course. So yeah, but those three for sure. I'm very blessed to have chosen family, friends, and adopted siblings for sure.
Luke?
Well, my ready-made family for one, and I have three of those. I have my drag family, I have my BTMI family, and then I have my biological family. My mom has been amazing. It took her a little time, but she's been amazing. So, um, and a whole bunch of other people that have just been on and off through my journey. So,
So mine kind of feels cheesy answering this, but it's completely true. So the first two people I met within the transgender community were the late Stephanie Mott. If you don't know who that is, she was a Kansas LGBTQ advocate who assisted in creating some big change here and worked with a lot of the organizations around here and worked alongside Luke a lot. My second biggest supporter would be Luke. And Luke knows that. Yeah, I can honestly say I wouldn't be here without Luke. Luke has walked me through a lot. I met Luke when I was just 17 years old. Yeah, so Luke introduced me to a large portion of the LGBTQ community, and I consider Luke part of my chosen family. So, and I think my third one would probably be, this sounds cheesy, planting peace. I think just like not anybody specific, but just like having this house here, it was kind of what got me in the door to the LGBT community and made me realize like there is something else out there. Because I wasn't one of those teenagers that had access to internet. We didn't have that, so. Okay, next question. And so all of our presenters know that if I ask a question, they do not have to answer. But if you have any questions for any of them as we're speaking, feel free to drop it in the chat box. So this one's kind of heavier. What, if any, problems do you face due to being transgender? Luke, can we start with you? Because I know.
uh, I don't know, the typical, whatever typical black males go through. Being stared at in the grocery store, Walmart, or whatever, being watched, people grabbing their purses when they see me or walk past me. I got some of that when I was pretending to be a female, but more so now that I'm a male. Because truth is, agree with it or not, but the black male is America's most thing that they're afraid of. And I have experienced a lot of that fear. Even though there's nothing to be for anybody to be afraid of in regards to me. But now that I am living in my truth, I'm living the truth of a black male. There's just been people who, even through customer service, they either deal with me or they won't. I don't know how to drive, but yes, I have been in cars that have been pulled over, and I've been the only person of color in the car. So the focus was myself, even though I'm sitting behind the driver. That was uncomfortable, but those are some of the things that I go through. I don't know if that's what y'all were looking for, or
Yeah, so I definitely want to add on that studies and research have shown that the transgender person of color community has faced higher rates of violence and crime and even death due to being transgender. So I definitely want to highlight that. You can pretty much Google that for any more information. Yeah. So we're really glad that Luke is here for us today and that Luke can provide that insight for us. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. So I feel like I'm pretty lucky in that I don't have a whole lot of stuff. I'm in a pretty safe environment with my work and with who I have to interact with normally, which is really great. But the main thing that I have to deal with as somebody who is genderqueer is that, like, just the presence of the gender binary constantly being so ingrained in everything, and being like, it's just a reminder that, like I mentioned earlier, like, I don't belong in this world, and that's really hard to deal with, every single day in, day out. People not even realizing what they're doing by doing these things because it's just ingrained in our society and nobody even thinks about it. But in terms of, like, blatant hate and stuff, I don't right now have to deal with any of that. Let's knock on wood. But yeah, I've had to deal with a lot more in the past. One of the big things was when I didn't have my legal name changed yet, dealing with the stuff I was still in my undergraduate time, dealing with, not having all that documentation right and not being able to access a lot of university services because then my dead name would have come up, which would have just been no. And so that was a really big issue for me. And just like, I don't know. A lot of it is just the little things that add up because there's like a trillion of them every day.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add? Okay, so I'm going to say that for me, it's probably the misinformation and misunderstanding, because a lot of misinformation from between the scientific, medical, religious side of things can impact our lives greatly and cause a lot of harm to us. And we've seen that not only out in the community, at schools, but we've also seen it at Capitol buildings and on Capitol Hill. So I just want to state that. What is the number one thing you want people to understand about being trans? And I realize we've already covered some of this, but if there was just one thing you could tell someone about being trans to help them understand, what would it be? Rexy?
I have to pick one.
Yes, you do. That's why I'm calling on you first.
Come back to me. I'm gonna need probably a year to figure that one out at minimum.
Okay, nay.
Words are hard. I'm just so used to being treated like an alien because I come from that fundamentalist background.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard enough that I'm gay, and then I start, discovering my gender identity, and then it's just like something that's kind of ignored. I promise I'm actually going to answer the question. I do this. I just set it up first. It's something that's kind of ignored. So I guess like I'm constantly fighting for the validity of who I am. So that's the thing. Like, I just want to be validated, and I know like it differs person to person how much that matters. But I guess what I want people to know about being trans is that we're just people who, yeah, it's like Rexy summarized for us, like, don't identify with the gender we were assigned at birth, and we're not broken. We don't need fixing. It just is. And yeah, I seek that, and that's why I'm very outspoken on the internet, like
Mm-hmm.
Jesse, like, yeah, Andy knows too. Like, anyone who knows me at all knows I'm very, very like, don't post that, you'll stir the pot. Like me, like, gonna do it because people need to know. And yeah, I think we all probably can relate to that, like, loneliness a little bit of like not feeling that validation. So anyways, I'll stop rambling now for the time being.
Luke or Spencer, do you want to answer that?
Human. One word. Human.
Spencer? Yes?
I mean, we are normal people. We have jobs, we have lives, we have families. We're just like you.
Rexy?
Okay. This is what I'm gonna go with, just because nobody's said it yet. It's not my final answer, so I reserve the right to decide a different one thing later.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I'm gonna say is that this is a quote from I'm pretty sure it's from a cartoon somewhere. I'm not sure. That's just where I saw it. But it's just because you don't understand something doesn't mean you can't respect it. A lot of cisgender people that are really well intentioned will have difficulty understanding stuff because it really is like totally outside of a lot of what cis people have to think about. Specifically, like when it comes to thinking about your gender, is something that cis people don't ever have to do, because everything just fit right away, and it's just, yeah, it's just a thing. So just because you don't understand why something is important, or why something is the way it is, doesn't mean that you can't respect that that's what's going on. And I think it's important to just remember that, trans people are the ones that know best about what trans people need. And it's important to respect the needs of other people.
Can I add something to that really quickly? Is that okay?
Go for it.
My ex-husband, whom I mentioned earlier, who is very much not an ally to us, said something once about trans people being confused. Like he used that. Yeah. And my ex-partner before him, who was with us at the time, who also is genderqueer, said, just because you don't understand something doesn't make them confused. Like, just because you don't understand their identity, that they're not the ones that are confused. Like, yeah. And just what, yeah, Rexy was saying reminded me of that.
Okay, I have one more. I have to share it. I'm
Do
sorry,
it.
but not trans people are not like the experts on everything. We don't all know every other trans person. We don't all know literally everything about being trans. None of us know everything about being trans because we're people and, you know, we have a limited amount of knowledge. Okay, I'll shut up.
Okay, so that actually ties into what I was going to say. So I wanted to say that all trans people have a different experience and that we all come from different walks of life, and what may be appropriate or correct to someone is not necessarily correct to the other. That's why if you're talking about definitions of labels, we prefer to, you know, direct you to like Trevor Project. They have a glossary, or the Human Rights Campaign has a glossary. But as far as just like little variances, whether it be our gender expression or how we prefer to use our pronouns, all of that, that varies on person to person. And transgender is not our whole identity. So some transgender people do prefer that people never know they are transgender. And that could be for safety, or that could just be because they really don't want to be identified like that. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's just everybody's preference. And so realize that while we may be transgender, and that comes with a ton of, it can come with a ton of issues, depending on location, support, all of that. We also have other issues like school or sports or life or driving or whatnot. Like our entire life is not focused on the fact we're trans. Usually.
Word up.
What advice would you give someone who has just realized they are transgender? And so this is a question more specifically related to our youth. I know we have a few youth that are watching over on Facebook who I happen to know don't come from affirming homes, who have joined on watching this. So if you could say something to youth, what advice would you give?
Can I start?
Go for it.
I like this question a lot. It's very personal to me because I like love teenagers and I've worked with teenagers since I was a teenager, and yeah, so my advice, and this is a hard one because this may not be something you can necessarily control right away, it may take time, but find those people that are safe. Yeah, that really is the starting point, is to find that safety, that shelter, and others who, even if they don't necessarily understand, they could be straight, they could be cis, but they respect and validate and love and love and love. And that was my lifesaver when I was in high school, like long before I realized I was trans. Like when I knew I was queer, I knew I liked girls, and I was in a very unsafe environment at church and in my home. It was very, very abusive spiritually and otherwise. So finding that safety, and it was only one person at the time. It was Andy, whom I mentioned because I love her. And it was only one person, but that grew into others that I found as I got older, as I graduated, because finding just one safe person gave me the courage to be myself and put myself out there and develop those abilities to make those relationships, seek that out. And it's very scary. It's scary and it's lonely and it's a big deal, and I don't pretend it's not. And that's why I work with kids, because I just need to be the person that I needed in high school.
Luke, I want to hear your answer on this. Not that I haven't already heard it, but I want you to share that answer with our community here.
Again, I think I agree with the finding a safe space, but also finding a mentor, somebody that can help them through the process, like the medical stuff. And you just have to, once you've planted your feet and made a decision, then you get to go however you want to go. But make sure that you find, again, I agree with the whole finding a safe place, but also finding a person that can mentor you through the process. I don't remember what else I say, but the safe thing is the first thing that needs to be said. The safe space, and finding a person that is willing to take the time with you to walk you through the process.
Rexy or Spencer? Do either of you want to answer this?
I just want to expand on my inbox is always open. There, my Facebook has been posted on a few pertaining to this stream, so I'm sure you'll be able to easily find me. Plus, my name's pretty unique.
Rexy, did you want to add anything?
I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay, so I do want to, since Spencer mentioned Facebook, so in our Equality Pride Pack Facebook group, which is where this event was listed, you can see that I tagged all of us. And I just want to state that trans people should not be your entire educational resource. And it's a common fact in the community that you should Google first and try to be mindful of your questions. But my inbox is always open to all questions, and I'm very much used to getting those. And Spencer's inbox is open, and so if you have any further questions besides what we end up answering here today, you're more than welcome to head on over there, and any of our presenters are of course welcome to say no or not respond. So, and you can also go onto our Facebook group after this. I'll be posting a bunch of links to resources related to things we talked about here. And so we actually, before I continue on with our normal questions, Lori asked, what can I, as the mother of an adult trans woman, do to support my daughter? Also, what can the community do to be more supportive of the LGBTQ community? So the first question, as the mother of an adult trans woman, I'm gonna say that not every transgender person is going to be wanting to go directly to their mom. Whether you have a fantastic relationship, which I'm sure you do because you're here and you're learning, or not, sometimes it can be awkward on us to ask our parents things. And so just keeping that line of communication open and just letting your daughter know that you are there for her, and then trying to inform yourself as best you can through the resources that we'll post in our group, and then just taking everything you're learning here today and just asking your daughter what she needs. Typical things that transgender women or females don't necessarily have someone outright teach them is how to apply makeup if they want to do that, how to go bra shopping. All these little things that, you know, women don't think about. Those are things that you really do. You need to teach the trans community that. So if any of you are parents of transgender kids, teach your kids what they need to know now so when they grow up, they know all these things. Or if you have an adult child that recently came out, definitely offer that. Whether we take it or not, just offering that is a huge step. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, kind of on the not really opposite side of that, but correlated side of that. If your child or adult child or actual child is transmasc or androgynous or yeah, any of those things, certain certain like societal norms that we are forced to go through because of being assigned female at birth can be very traumatic and can be very difficult to go through, like bra shopping and like, you know, like even expectations like makeup, or even more on a more serious note, like gynecological visits, like that have to happen when you know you're 21, or is recommended to happen when you're 21. Like things like that can be very triggering, very traumatic, totally triggered body dysphoria. So be sensitive to that. If you, like what Jesse was saying, if you're not the person they want to talk to about it, support them finding those outside relationships and support systems with other people in the community who understand, who have been there. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah, I'm done.
That was perfect. Does anybody else want to add?
Yeah, so one thing I'd like to add, this is kind of my number one advice for anything that's related to people's relationships, any kind of relationship. Communication is so important, and we don't do enough of it. So, like, literally, I would say in this situation, just ask her, like, hey, I want to be supportive. What can I do to help support you? And I'm sure she'll have some answers for you about things you can do, and kind of respecting that and trying to do those things if you can. And just being there as a shoulder to cry on too. As you know, a lot of stuff can be like she might have to be dealing with a lot of stuff that's really stressful and traumatic, that you just literally don't understand. And it's okay to be in that, like, to just be there as a person that she's talking to. If she comes to talk to you, you don't feel like you need to provide advice or something, because it's probably going to be bad. um like, I'm just being honest. And that might not even be what she needs. Maybe she just needs to vent whatever's going on, right? So yeah, communicate.
Okay, so I'm going to hold the second question you had, Lori. That is actually something I'm going to end with today. So if you just want to hold that thought and hang on. And we'll also be posting the recording of this over on our Facebook group. So the next question actually is, what would you like to tell parents of transgender children? So that was kind of perfect timing. Rexy, you're starting.
Gosh, see, I don't like giving these general advice for the most part, because everything is so based on the situation. I guess one thing I can think of is, a lot of times, as a parent of a transgender child, especially if they're still a minor, you really need to be their champion, which you should already be kind of your kid's champion anyways. But you might be the only person that's going to do that. And there could be significant resistance depending on where you're at, from teachers, school administrators, anybody that, like, child care workers or whatever. Really depends on the situation, but you need to be there, and everything that I just said as well, just add it to that.
Does anybody else want to touch on that? I can see you shaking your head nay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Did you want to add anything?
No, I
Okay.
actually don't really have anything to add to this question here.
Okay, so I want to add on that as a parent, I've been a parent. I'm young, but I've been a parent. I know how parents want to protect their kids and they want to know everything and they want to do the best they can. But what you have to realize about the transgender community is there is no best path. It's all completely based on the individual. What works for you as a parent and your child may not work for the parent across the street and their child. So it is very situational based. All you can do is inform yourself on, you know, let's say treatment options or like pronouns, legal protections for your child, things like that. Just keeping yourself informed and then just kind of communicating with your child at whatever age category they're at, because the way we talk to 3-year-olds isn't the same way we're going to talk to 17-year-olds. And unless there's an issue there, in which case, of course, we would. But for the most part, we have different language skills and we know a lot more at that age. So, or as an adult, you're a lot more aware and a lot of people are going to be independent. So just, it's very situational based. So please don't freak out. Stay calm. We know you're trying, and when your child comes out to you, it's probably not going to be the same day they realize they're transgender. They've probably been holding that in a long time. And so just like know that we know you have a catch up period to like come to terms with this, but usually by the time we come to you, it's just like, hey, I've come to terms with this. Here's this. And so while we may want to start going through a process, whatever that looks like, whether that be name changes or hormone blockers or just various things, or even dressing and stuff, we may want to go through with that, and you as a parent are going to have to understand, like, we need to keep moving forward, and while you come to terms with that, we need to keep moving. So
And talking about coming out to parents kind of made me think of this. One thing that I've seen with a lot of parents of trans kids, especially if their kids didn't come out until they were like teenagers or, kind of older. But even with, really young kids, like even with 3 and 4-year-olds, like it's pretty normal to kind of feel grief in that kind of moment and to feel like you've lost a child. A lot of people experience that emotion, and so it's a pretty normal response. But while that's happening, you're also gaining kind of a different child at the same time, and so focusing on who, I don't know exactly how to word this. I still struggle with that one specifically, but I just wanted to make sure that like make it known that that's normal. It's a fairly normal response. It's not you're being selfish or something like that. A lot of people kind of have to go through that, and be there as a support for your child. And when you realize that they're so much happier than they were before, you'll get out of that grief, because they will be happier than they were before.
okay, next question. This is one of my favorite ones. I was recently at a conference with Rexy, and it was basically an educator conference. It was Human Rights Campaign Time to Thrive. And so we were both at that in DC, if any of you were also there. So our next question comes from that. How can teachers and other educators make schools more inclusive for transgender children specifically? But welcome to opening up that question for all LGBTQ children. And I want to go to Rexy because you work on a college campus. So.
Yeah, so one thing I think is providing resources on certain parts of certain like things that a lot of transgender people do during kind of the beginning of transition time. So providing resources on how to change a name. A lot of parents have no idea what to do if their kid wants to change their name, and there's really like all the resources online are like so messed up and wrong in weird ways. So like having something that's actually good is like something that's needed. A lot of parents will like just go to a lawyer, which you don't, at least in Kansas, you don't really need that. You're just going to pay a lot of money for something that was pretty straightforward. So that kind of stuff, but also like resources on, you know, certain medical treatments that are available, and kind of like going about that process, especially with like the importance of hormone blockers for you know, adolescent trans people, and the kind of effect that'll have later in life when they are physically ready to start hormone supplements. And another thing that is really important that has been kind of getting implemented at a number of places is not requiring like a legal name and everything, letting, you know, people use their actual name, and if their legal name is something else, kind of it does need to be in the background because, you know, legal stuff ties to it, but it can be in the background, and what's in the foreground is their actual name, their chosen name that they go by. um, that's important. And just being, I mean, having cultural humility, I think, is another really big thing. Just being, you know, willing to kind of listen to what other people have to say and kind of be in this journey together.
I can't even begin to like second how important the name thing is. Like, yes, that so important, because also like you could potentially be outing kids who aren't out, like if you use the wrong name, and then that puts them in danger. So there's so many reasons why that's important, to respect people's chosen names as much as you can.
You're
I want
muted,
to add to that. I actually attend the college that Rexy works at, and I have not gone through my legal name change process yet for various reasons. And so when I enroll in all of that, I have to go through a process of explaining to the university why I don't go by. I refer to it as my birth name, but you'll commonly hear it as dead name within the transgender community, or old name, or the name you don't call them. And so on all my school documents and on my online classes, it shows my birth name there. And so my very first introduction is an email to my teacher saying, I am trans, here is my name, here are my pronouns, please use them. And my next one is to my class. My name shows as this on this online community, but here's what I go by. And it's an entire process every semester when people like forget or they don't see that, of trying to be called my correct name. So if you can help your child get their name legally changed and they want to get it legally changed, please do so. If that's not a route they want to take, but they want to go by another name, then please seek out resources, and talk to your college's student life or LGBTQ department about how you can get their preferred name on the roster so that they are not continuously having to out themselves or on some campuses risk their safety. Does anyone else want to add to that? Okay. What questions do you wish people would not ask you about being transgender?
I wish people would ask me what pronouns I use rather than am I a boy or a girl. I think I talked over someone. I'm sorry.
Anybody else?
I mean, one thing is, I think I haven't really had to deal with this very much, but I know it's something that a lot of trans people do have to deal with a lot of, is don't ask weirdly personal questions about our bodies. Like, don't just, you know, you don't just walk up to a random person and say, hey, have you had like surgery on your genitals? Like, that's really weird. Why are you asking somebody that just because they said they're trans? You know, the medical side of stuff, what people choose to do there, and whether they even do stuff or not, like that's a personal decision, and it's a personal thing. So like, don't just feel like you need to ask them and they need to tell you that stuff.
I want to add to that.
Also, oh, go ahead. I already talked.
No, you go ahead, and then I'll explain it.
Don't ask weirdly personal questions about like how we have sex too, because that's a thing, and that's you don't just like Rexy said, you don't just ask people that. Like, yeah. So like, I don't know why people think like, oh, this person's trans. I can like ask them about like how their body works in like very personal circumstances. That's not a thing.
Take a biology class.
Yeah.
Oh,
Google.
there will be a resource posted on our Facebook group for a transgender biology teacher who I had the opportunity to meet in February, who is amazing and willing to answer a lot of questions related to biology. So I'll definitely drop that link. Yes, Sam. I'm so excited. Sam is wonderful. So I wanted to add to that, if you are in a space with mostly transgender people, or you have two people who are friends who are transgender, they may be asking those questions we just told you not to ask to each other. That does not give you permission to ask those questions or to comment. So I know I have very personal conversations with other transgender people, but I am not going to have those same conversations with even my straight allies or even my straight chosen family. And even there's even questions that I will not ask another trans person. So I'm not going to ask someone how they were born. I mean, I put mine out there. I was born assigned female at birth or AFAB. But I'm not going to ask another transgender person that. A lot of them offer up the information just because that's the thing in our community, is figuring out where we all came from, but that's still a personal question. So just because we ask each other these things, that does not give you permission to ask each other these things. Transgender people build a certain relationship based on us being trans and sharing in those experiences and learning from each other. And we don't really necessarily want to take that really openness outside the community with people who aren't able to relate to us. And it's great if you have transgender people that'll ask those questions. I know I ask those questions. I answer those questions for a lot of parents and stuff on Facebook. So you're welcome to ask me things, and I'll tell you whether they're too personal. But general rule of thumb, don't ask those to trans people. Okay. So this next question is, how can people help or be there for someone who has come out to them as transgender? So I'm going to start answering this and then ask someone else to actually answer it. So I want to say that if someone comes out to you, that could be because they couldn't take holding it in anymore. That could be because you're their safe person. It could be you're their parent, or they could look up to you in a way and want your acceptance. And so in that moment, please try to refrain from thinking, wow, they just came out to me. because that just kind of like takes away from what you should be focusing on, which is what the next response is. So if someone else could chime in on how they wish someone would respond to that. How should people respond when someone comes out to them? Spencer,
Yeah.
Luke.
I mean, honestly, the less of a deal you make about it, the better. Just listen to them. Make sure that you take note of what pronouns and what name that you need to use. And if that changes, roll with it.
Luke.
I guess just listen and be encouraging, and if possible, try to positively empower them in some way. But the biggest thing is just to allow them to talk about it and listen to them. So I agree with Spencer.
All right. I'll add a couple things. So one thing is ask them if they need any support from you, and let them know that you're willing to kind of help them fight if they want it, and if they don't, that's up to them. And let them know that you accept who they are and that you love them, and that you can be there to talk with them about this stuff, because there's a lot of talk. And then if you have a particularly close relationship with this person, and you could consider offering help in certain ways that you might have specific help in, like some of the stuff we talked about earlier with like doing makeup, or um, shopping for clothes, certain things that are specifically gendered, but only if you have a good relationship with that person, like really good, not just some person that you kind of know, but you need to be good friends, I think, at least, for that. But yeah, the big thing is going to be letting them talk, get their feelings out in the world, and being there to listen without being judgmental, without offering unsolicited advice, and just asking if what you can do to support them, or what supports they need from you. You're muted again.
Nay, do you want to add anything?
I'm good.
Okay. So next question is a very hot topic right now within the transgender community, and it is, how do you wish people would respond when you correct them? So when people use our wrong pronouns, when we correct them, how do we wish that you would respond to us correcting you? So there's been a lot of social media on this of saying I'm sorry or thank you. So I just want to ask everybody here, if you have to correct someone on their pronouns, how do you wish they would respond to you?
I make it as casual as possible, so I'm not making them feel like awful, and I'm also not making it uncomfortable for myself. So like, I think a good response is, oh, okay, like, good to know. Like, I'm glad you told me, just because no one did anything wrong. There's no reason to make them feel guilty. Like, yeah. So yeah, that's what I would prefer when someone, like, I really accept any pronouns, so that specifically isn't the problem for me. It's more like when people make ignorant statements about my identity or transgender people in general, or when they just are offensive without meaning to be in some way, and I just will gently correct them, like, hey, this is actually like the appropriate, like, you know, way to say that or ask that. And, you know, of course they can say I'm sorry, but like it's really nice if they're just like, oh, okay, you know, thank you for educating me, like I really appreciate that.
Yeah, just one thing to kind of add to that is, you know, I think whether you say I'm sorry or thank you is really kind of up to, I don't personally see much of a difference. Like I get that there's a difference, but I feel like the more important part is that you correct yourself and then move on. So I think it's so like if you were to use the wrong pronouns, if you were to say she for somebody whose pronouns are he, then you need to correct yourself and then continue, because that really kind of shows that respect that you're changing that. Whatever you do, don't like get down on your knees and like start crying about how terrible of a person you are for messing up again and like, you know, make everything really awkward, because it's not about you. um, so you know, don't freak out.
Luke or
Word up.
Spencer?
I just I guess I get the apology and whatnot, but I also get the question of could you help me or remind me when I do mess up, is the response I normally get. But I'm okay with that. That's pretty much the one I get.
Spencer, do you want to add anything?
Well, it summed it up pretty nicely.
Yeah, so I specifically chose this question because of the controversy on it within our own community. So I want to point out that the way we grow up varies on how we hear things, and that just goes with where you're from, culture. So the issue is for some people, not everybody clearly experiences this, but some people feel like when you say I'm sorry, they're forced to say it's okay. And that to them is basically they feel like they're saying it's okay to misgender me. It's okay to use the wrong pronouns. And so that's why you'll have some of the transgender community posting that they prefer you say thank you or anything but I'm sorry, but some of us do want to hear I'm sorry. So that's just one of those things within the community that very much varies on the person. But like I think Rexy said, don't just like break down over it. Keep it moving. It's unless you keep doing it over and over and it's intentional and it's clear it's intentional, then we're really not going to have a huge, massive issue with it unless it's a huge dysphoria day and not everybody experiences dysphoria.
See, I always just say apology accepted, unless I'm feeling a little sassy, and then I'll say no, I don't accept your apology. um, for that specific reason, it's because like it's not okay, but
Yeah.
it's not, you know, something wrong with you that is worthy of seppuku or anything like that.
Yeah, so I was definitely raised to say thank you for apologizing. So that whole issue was brought to my attention via Twitter within our community. So that's why I wanted to touch on it. And I totally respect that the way I respond to things isn't the same way one of my close friends respond to things. It's very much a personal issue. So definitely just be mindful of your wording on all things. I mean, that's not such a huge deal as like consistently misgendering someone on purpose, but definitely be mindful of how you're talking. I want to go back to Lori's second question and ask any of you if you have questions to please drop them in the chat box now. a couple of our panelists actually have another panel tonight, as well as do I for organizations we are a part of. So if you get to know anything, it's that trans people either seem to be completely overloaded with stuff, or they're completely like living an amazing life, and they like pulling them away from like family and like all of what they're doing is really hard. So definitely want to be mindful of everybody's time. So
Some of us are your normal losers who just do a couple things and, you know.
well, I just want to say you're completely not a loser, and I can confer to that. Okay, there it is. What can the community do to be more supportive of the LGBTQ community? And this is a trans panel, but I definitely want to harp on that. I know many of us in this room also, or at least a few of us, about half of us, yeah, have a different sexual orientation as well. And I'm not going to out anybody for that. You're welcome to out yourselves.
Hella gay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, I'm asexual and I'm queer, so welcome. Yeah. So who wants? Spencer, do you want to start?
Oh Lord. Gosh, I might have to go back to the
Luke.
I just, I guess to tell, suggest to them maybe attend a couple of events. If all else fails, I tell them to attend at least one Pride event. I keep getting that question all the time, and so I just try to say, attend an event. And again, as I said, go to Pride, or go to a Pride just to see what it's like. Or I don't know, have a conversation, do some research. I don't know.
Nay or Rexy, do you want to answer that?
I have a thought, but I'm not sure how to articulate it.
Go if you want some more time to think about it.
Yeah, pass me.
So one thing, I mean, some of these things your community might already have, so doing them wouldn't be better. But some things that are really important, policies related to, having legal protections for trans people, non-discrimination ordinances when it comes to employment, housing, medical care, all that stuff is really important. So working to get that kind of stuff through is important. Making sure that schools and churches and other kind of public institutions are aware of like some of the issues that LGBT people face and supportive and prepared to kind of help with that type of stuff is important. Like Luke said, show up to stuff. Like a lot of people just sit in their house and don't do anything. And like just going to events that are put on by queer people for queer people is a great way to like show support and learn stuff about them. I'm sure if you look hard enough, you'll find a nonprofit organization that really wants money. Pro tip, it's not very hard. So you could donate if you have the means for that. I mean, there's all sorts of other stuff. I could ramble on about this for hours.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, well, I'm gonna reach out to all of our panelists and have them make a full list. So anything that they didn't get a say on here, definitely be included. So go ahead, Nay.
I just needed to say that I need to head out actually, but I wanted to just say thank you for having me, and I've really enjoyed this, and I really care deeply for you all. And my personal messages are always open. And I also want to throw out again that there's this amazing Facebook group called Pride Rock, and it specifically kind of caters to queer and trans people who have come from a faith-based background, so we can kind of have that commonality of spiritual religious trauma and kind of getting through that. But really it's open for anyone that just needs a queer community. So want to throw that out. That's how I know Jesse, through that community. So but yeah, thank you for having me.
I want to say that Pride Rock is part of Queer Christian Fellowship, and we can drop that link on our Facebook group. Lori, was it Lori? Lori said that's not unique to trans, and I think what Lori is referring to was my comments on we seem to be either entirely overloaded or with our family. So what I mean by that,
a normal loser that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, or that, which Rexy frequently brings up, which is a point too. I mean, but we're all amazing. But for trans people, the reason I say that is I can speak specifically for, well, yeah, now all of our panelists in the chat. We come from a state where it is legal to fire us or prevent us from having housing due to our identity. So I don't know about Spencer, but I can say for sure, me, Rexy, and Luke have been either on Capitol steps or at City Hall advocating for our lives. I can say me and Rexy literally had a representative say they would not vote to protect our lives in February. So it's not just your normal overloaded, we're there and we're speaking out and we're being visible and we are fighting for our lives, and in the process we are risking our jobs and our housing should we find out that where we work or who we rent under, if we don't own our own house, is at stake, and we could lose everything by doing what we're doing. And that is why the LGBTQ community has a very much higher poverty rate, and we also have higher suicide rates, transgender community being the highest on both of those. And I can link you to studies and research if you want. Feel free to DM me if you want those. Does anybody have any more questions, or do any of our panelists have anything they want to say to anyone?
I guess behind me, not really behind me, it's just a virtual background, is the genderqueer flag, if you're not familiar with it. We got the purple, my finger's disappearing into it, purple, and then green, specifically picked because they're not, purple was picked because it's the mix of blue and pink, and then this green is the exact opposite on the color wheel. That's where that came from, and then there's a white line in the middle. But that's the genderqueer flag. It's pretty cool. So if you didn't know what that is, that's what it is.
Okay, so I wanted to wrap up here with some more information. So thanks, Luna. Luna says we're all amazing. So Planting Peace has both this equality house and this trans house, and the equality house will end up being a marriage museum. That is what currently working on here. And the Equality Pride PAC group will have events and any volunteer opportunities that may arise here or over at the trans house or with the garden and whatnot. And then if you want to speak to Planting Peace, then definitely message in on the Facebook page or go to the Planting Peace website and you can find our email on there. And anybody and everyone, whether you're straight or in the LGBT community is welcome to come to the house and sign the wall and take pictures, and definitely make sure you tag us on those. And all of our panelists can be found on our Facebook group. And I want to thank all of our panelists for taking their time to do this. And thank you, thank you, thank you, and happy Transgender Day of Visibility to all of us. Super exciting.
Do you see me? Am I visible?
You are visible. I see you.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I love you. Oh my gosh,
I
yes.
didn't expect it. I
I
thought I
love
was
it.
invisible this whole time.
No, you are very much seen. I see you. We see you. We all see you. And we love you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. And this will be posted on our Facebook group, the full recording of it, in